All I can say is, psych! I'm back for one more video. Ha! All right, so today we're going to talk about independent and dependent variables. So make sure you have your composition book open and let's get ready. First, let's talk about what an independent variable is. And I know this isn't anywhere on your foldable in your composition book, but you may want to write this off to the side or something in your composition book. An independent variable is a variable in an equation whose values make up the domain. So in other words, the independent variable is your x value, your domain, your input, all of those things that we had when we talked about domain and range in the part 1 video for the Dix-Roy. That also applies to independent variable for your x. In other words, an independent variable in an equation may have its value freely chosen regardless of the values of any other variable. And since we did independent variable, we also have to do dependent variable. Dependent variable is a variable whose value depends on the values of one or more independent variables. In other words, the dependent variable depends on the independent variable. So I want you to look at the graphic for your independent and dependent variables. And this graphic is going to help us explain the difference between the two, because this is a concept that you tend to get mixed up quite a bit. So basically, the changes in the independent variable and then in your arrow, cause changes in, and then in the last box, the dependent variable. Now, x is always the independent variable, or in other words, your input. And y is always the dependent variable or output. Okay, another way to think of this is the dependent variable depends on the independent variable. It's kind of like cause and effect in English. Okay? All right, so now let's go, and I want you to take your blue sheet of paper that has all the rectangles and go ahead and pause the video so you can cut all those little rectangles out, and make sure you have some glue as well. So pause the video and I'll see you in a few. So now let's talk about a few of them that were the most difficult on the paper to match up. So we have the number of squares Marshall cuts the pizza into, and we have the number of people attending the potluck. So we would think of it backwards. The number of squares Marshall cuts the pizza into depends on the number of people attending the potluck. Whatever you're depending on is the independent variable. Okay? So what you're starting with is your dependent, and you're ending with your independent variable. So make sure what you're going to do on your paper is below your graphic that we just filled in, make 2 columns, one labeled independent and one labeled dependent. And then we're going to put these in the correct columns matched up with the correct scenario. All right, so get those 2 glued in. The next 2 we're going to look at is the number of orchestra members who go on tour and the number of hotel rooms they will need to reserve. the number of hotel rooms they will need to reserve depends on the number of orchestra members who go on tour. So again, your dependent variable depends on your independent variable. All right, let's go to the next one that we're going to do together. Here we have the number of visitors to your booth and the total amount of candy you will hand out. The total amount of candy you will hand out depends on the number of visitors to your booth. The last one that I'm going to do with you today is the number of students attending the dance and the number of pictures the photographer will take. The number of pictures the photographer will take depends on the number of students attending the dance. So I've done the first 4 with you. You're going to do the last ones on your own. I think you should be able to figure out which ones pair up. When I was looking at them, I felt like these 4 were the most difficult to figure out how they paired up. So I want you to try and pair them up the best you can, and we'll go over those tomorrow to make sure you have them correct in class. So I will see you tomorrow.